Alabama, and Beyond, Creating a Lasting Legacy by Dottie Childers Gravely. Chapter 6. Mexico. In June 1970, because I knew some Spanish and felt some nudging from the Lord, I decided to go along with a group from church on a missions trip to Iguala, Mexico, in the same state as Acapulco. Some of the details of that trip seemed to be a lesson in how not to do a mission trip, but God did honor our naive attempt to please Him. A frequent speaker at Waco from Mexico, missionary Earl Keelam, often invited us to come down, stay with him, and help out with mission work. He always quoted the friendly Mexican expression, "Mi casa es tu casa." Then he gave the translation in its entirety, "My house is your house. All that's lacking is for you to occupy it, the house." So our group decided to take him up on his offer. Our group of 7 girls and 1 guy pulled our money and headed south in my van and Barbara Smith's new Volkswagen Bug. Gas cost about 25 cents per gallon then, so we figured that $20 each would cover gasoline expense. We packed sandwiches, drinks, water, and lots of cookies. I got my van serviced the day before we left, so it should have been in top shape. But during the first leg of the trip to Waco, Texas, the team members following behind us in the Volkswagen noticed that oil droplets were trailing behind the van. We just bought extra oil and pushed on. At Waco, the old van went to a mechanic, and we were delayed a good part of the day. Finally, we moved on and crossed the border at Laredo, Texas. We were in Mexico. Unfortunately, the thin air of the Mexican mountains was a strain on the carburetor in my 1963 Chevy van. About 30 miles beyond San Luis Potosi, I heard a clang under the hood and the engine died. It never moved again. We all quickly held a council meeting to decide what to do with a sick van on the roadside in a foreign country. "Let's go to a nearby village and find a mechanic," someone suggested. I waited in the van so that both groups would have a Spanish speaker on hand. Diane, the other Spanish speaker, and all those that could fit into Barbara's Volkswagen found a friendly, charming little village called Oyoy Caliente. It had a natural hot springs that the villagers used for washing clothes or bathing. They had erected a building over the springs, but no mechanic was to be found. With Diane's broken Spanish, she learned that it was siesta hour. No help would be available right away. There was 1 telephone in the village. Another girl, Carolyn, in our group had an idea. She had a boyfriend who worked with missionaries Roger and Linda West about 100 miles away in Celaya, Mexico. Why not call him, since he would know the ropes on car repairs and was fluent in Spanish? But Carolyn did not have the West's phone number. The council met again. This time it decided to send Carolyn, Diane, and the 1 male in our group, Fred, to Celaya. Again, I waited on the roadside with the remainder of the group. We still had cookies and water. We managed to put makeshift curtains over the van windows for privacy and locked the doors. After dark, a few local people surrounded our van and began to rock it gently. Probably they were just having a little fun with us, but it was not fun to us. Then suddenly one of the girls inside spoke out a bold declaration of God's certainty to protect us. I wish I had recorded her words, because it instantly gave all of us an unlikely, unexplainable peace that everything was going to be all right. We all felt that we had just heard a New Testament type prophecy, one that speaks to people for their upbuilding and encouragement and consolation. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 3 from the ESV. Worries disappeared. The curious folks outside retired for the night, and we did too. About 24 hours after seeing the little blue Volkswagen drive away, it came back with help. The missionary boyfriend, Paul, knew how to get a wrecker and get us all checked into La Panorama Hotel in San Luis Potosi, a large city. The only problem was that it was around 10 o'clock p.m., and all the restaurants were closed. Finally, we found some young boys selling corn on the cob from a tin wash tub filled with warm water. We became their satisfied customers. Corn never tasted so good. We all slept well that night and said that we went from rags to riches. The next day, Paul helped us deal with the van problem. We found that the engine would be very expensive to repair. None of us could afford that. One government official told me that I had three choices: repair the van, ship it to the border, or give it to the Mexican government. Their laws said that if I entered the country with a vehicle, I must exit with it or donate it to the government. The latter seemed to me the easiest option. I became carless. Now we needed another council meeting to find a plan B to get to Iguala. Some overly friendly taxi drivers offered to take us to the whole distance. We opted for a bus ride. Carolyn called missionary Wayne Myers in Mexico City to see if second-class buses were safe. He said it would be fine, but we might have to travel with a few chickens. The bus rode into Iguala safe with no feathers on board. We had reached our destination. Brother Keelan was a gracious host. We attended and helped his Iguala church and others he had established over the years. We helped him stamp addresses on gospel tracts, sang Spanish songs, and typed up song sheets and invitations for meetings. His cook made delicious oatmeal with sweetened condensed milk. We traveled to outlying villages in the back of Brother Keelan's pickup truck with his camper cover. Several of us crowded into that small space and held on as we bounced and jostled over roads that resembled my dad's logging roads through his woods. In one village, Coacoyula, we met a church elder, Brother Placido, who was once about to be hanged by other villagers for embracing the new religion that Brother Keelan brought. Suddenly a man on a horse had appeared and ordered the people to cut him down or answer to me. They obeyed and never seriously bothered the grateful elder again. Brother Placido treated us to some wonderful pan dulce, a slightly sweet bread, after the evening services. Our team went throughout the streets to Brother Placido's village and invited people to come to the services. A few pigs wandered around on the cobblestone streets. An annoying type of stinging flies bit our legs. Diane and I had the privilege of praying for salvation with one woman who had gotten our invitation and came to visit one night. All the discomfort was worth it for her. Brother Keelam announced one day that all of us were going to the state of Veracruz on the Atlantic side of Mexico. A special conference for people from various churches was going to be held there on Mexico's highest mountain, Pico de Orizaba. It proved to be a very interesting trip. It was an honor to be included. Into the camper compartment we went and rode along the highways and toll road all day until we reached the base of the mountain at Samidera about nightfall. We could see the towering snow-capped mountain reaching about 18,000 feet in elevation. We slept that first night on our inflated air mattresses placed on wooden pews of a humble church in Brother Keelam's network. We needed our rest for the next day's excursions. As soon as possible after sunrise the next day, we drove a little farther up the mountain. Then we left the truck behind in Tetla because the last 5 miles to our destination could only be covered by horseback or on foot. We walked along clearly defined trails with picturesque mountain slopes and vegetation all around us as we wound upward into thinner, cooler air. We noticed an old Franciscan church with huge stones and wondered how they had been placed together in such a remote place. Fields were cultivated up the sides of mountains. They would have impressed any Tennessee farmer. At one point, Brother Keelam hastened past us. He was excited about the meeting and wanted to get to the indigenous village church that was hosting the event. One of his preachers in training, Juan from Peru, carried a 50-pound generator on his hip. The village of Socoltla had no electricity, so the generator was needed for lights at night. The village lay at an 11,000-foot elevation. A goat herd family in the church moved out of their home those few days of the conference to provide us with lodging. They stayed with in-laws. We slept on the floor on air mattresses and ignored the horse kicking the outside wall sometimes. The men shaved near the wall before a fragment of a mare. The cornfield served as a restroom. We ate our breakfasts and suppers of beans and rice just outside the smoke-filled kitchen house. The most delicious coffee ever was brewed over an open fire in a former motor oil container. The coffee beans came from trees grown on the mountainside. I had the privilege of sharing a Bible story during one afternoon session of the conference. I absorbed all that I could from the teaching sessions and admired the faith of my Mexican family of faith. Attendees had come from many places in Mexico. In Mexico, I really developed a love for the Mexican people. They seemed so humble and genuinely hungry for God. One poor family in the church of Iguala made a special meal with red mole for us, sacrificing their meager resources to buy cokes and killing their chicken. Their home had a dirt floor and no plumbing or electricity. The mother's eyes filled with tears as she told me that her little girl was learning to read. Oh, I would have stayed in Mexico for years just to teach that mama how to read. I believe having a willingness to extend ourselves for others is a key to leaving a lasting legacy. How can love ripples go out from our lives if we keep what we have to ourselves? That family certainly extended themselves for strangers from afar. When time came for most of our team members to return to the U.S., they traveled again in Brother Keelam's truck. A young Texan named Ronnie Fowler, who assisted Brother Keelam, drove them to the border. He developed a friendship with Diane. Her parents met the team at Brownsville, Texas, and took them home. 3 of us were able to stay a little longer in Iguala and help out with some of Brother Keelam's office work. We finally headed home in Barbara's Volkswagen. We made a brief stop in Celaya to thank Paul for his help. We stayed in the home of Roger and Linda West, but they were out of town during the evening church service. Another giant of faith spoke at that meeting. He was Daniel Ost, an American missionary who loved Mexicans so much that he took on Mexican citizenship. Over the years, he had flown his airplane over villages and dropped tracts, started a Bible correspondence ministry, fathered several churches, and mentored many pastors. All of his 8 children served the Lord. He invited us to pay a visit to this home in El Carmen near Monterrey. There we met his wife and shared a meal with his family. During one stop on our return trip, we visited a large market in Monterrey. I asked a little boy if he knew what he needed to do to go to heaven. He shrugged his shoulders and guessed, "Go to the First Communion?" With my limited Spanish, I told him the good news that heaven is a free gift provided by God through the sacrifice of Jesus. We cannot earn it or deserve it. In that market, I saw the poverty of spiritual truth all around me. In my Morgan County, Alabama, almost anyone in the public market at least knew what was meant by being saved and had heard about the gospel. In Mexico's masses, such familiarity was unknown. Again, I would have given the rest of my life to be able to share this good news with them. No doubt this notion of sharing came from the Lord, my pastors and church teachers, and also from my mother. I recall one day as a child at the old house, Mother sent me on an errand. My job was to carry a bucket of sweet potatoes up to the top of a hill where Dad would one day plant our second home, then go further up the road a little and finally up a steep driveway to a neighbor's house. Oh, I dreaded that uphill journey with that load for my skinny little arms to lift and bear such a great distance. I asked, why can't the neighbors grow their own sweet potatoes? Mother seized a teachable moment and answered, when you come into something good, you should share it with others. I never forget her words or how much heavier those potatoes became with each step. Mother was an incredible giver. But I realized in 1970 that any sharing in Mexico would have to wait. I had to return to my homeland and watch for the opportunity to return to Mexico. I worked on my Spanish. 2 more trips came along in 1971 and 1972. Finally, I began corresponding with Linda West, wife of veteran missionary Roger West, in Celaya, Mexico. Although I had never met her, upon Paul's recommendation, Linda offered me a position in their home, helping with their children, and said that she would believe with me for the finances. I transferred my utilities to my roommate's name and began paying off my last outstanding debt, about $150 to the Goodyear Tire store. I would not leave the U.S. owing money. But before the last payment was made, a detour had been set up just ahead. Points to ponder. Number 1. Pastor Steverson once remarked that occasionally we may find ourselves in situations that we would never have had the faith to enter into, but we must use our faith to get out of them. Can you think of an example of this in your life? Number 2. Simple assistance or hospitality can be remembered for years by the recipients. Reflect on someone's kindness to you at home or abroad. And number 3, can you see yourself going on a mission trip?